talking about the construct 1.1. And my name is Alfredo Ford. I'm working at the moment in this consultant company IBTCI, but I was formerly senior M&E advisor at UNFPA, and so you'll see that background in my presentation. So this construct is 1.1, and it's an existing indicator. And of course, the previous meetings have indicated that they would like a modification to this indicator. And it's an indicator that measures women's decision-making power about timing and number of births. Now, the way it has been suggested to be formulated is, as you can see in the right side, a proportion of women aged 15 to 49 who make their own informed and empowered decisions regarding sexual relations, contraceptive use, and reproductive health care, and the timing and number of births. And so you'll see, obviously it sounds a little long for an indicator, but we'll look into each and every aspect of it. So first, just clarifying the construct itself, and you can see that it's actually an already existing indicator is a Sustainable Development Goal indicator 561 within the goal 5 of gender equality and women empowerment. So you can see that those key expressions are there. It's processed and reported by the UN, and you can see where, and in fact, I provide a link there, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs and Statistical Division, and it's been reported since 2017. UNFPA is custodian of that indicator. And so important to clarify that it's a composite indicator. So it's built from 3 separate survey questions. And we'll see when we come to it. And the base denominator, if you like, have been married women of reproductive age using contraception. But since DHS, which is the source of the information, phase number 7, it includes now all women, so including those who are not currently using contraception. And as I put there, the components for each of the components of the indicator has data available since 2007. And it's a question where women are asked directly to assert, and so they themselves respond to the question whether you make this decisions. And of course, that's why it's not assumed or derived, but it's direct response to questions. The state of measurement is that in the 2020 report from the UN, we have information for 57 countries. Most are in sub-Saharan Africa, and they have several of them have more than one data point. So we can even have some trend analysis. Data comes from the demographic and health surveys, and but there are efforts and negotiations to include it in, for example, UNICEF's multiple indicator cluster survey, the mix, and then other national surveys that might include fertility-related questions or women's empowerment-related questions. And of course, data and references and links to the indicator can be found, in WHO, in the World Bank, and other websites that I put there. Okay, so just to quickly give you an idea, for example, in this latest 2020 report, which was last February, there was, from these 57 countries, there was already, and maybe it's a bit too small for you to look at all the numbers, but you can see that worldwide, 55% of women are able to make these 3 types of decision, their own decision. As you can see, the previous bars are that women can make a decision on their own health care, decision on the use of contraception, and then to say no if they don't want to have sex. And so those are the three components. And then, of course, this is a weighted average of those three individual components. Okay, and as you can see that you have global, but you can also break it down by different regions in the world and even sub-regions, and you can see that some of those bars and some of the, and the indicator can go as low as 36% in Middle Africa and as high as say 76% in Eastern Asia and Southeast Asia. The other thing that is additional features, so this indicator is that it can be broken down by urban, rural, subnational, so even some provinces within the country, by age, by educational level, but by household wealth, as you know, in demographic and health surveys, so that is collected. And on the right side, I'm not going to go into detail, but one can see already that one can gauge and measure differences by all these covariates. Now, just very briefly, just to ratify that this indicator checks on all the characteristics of a good indicator with validity and feasibility and data availability, harmonization, relevance, and even the usefulness and interpretability of the indicator. Just on relevance, one part that I want to highlight is that it's actually, it has already been analyzed as being associated with key maternal health indicators. And that's the next slide, where you can see that there is, it's associated, for example, between those who meet and those who do not meet that indicator. You can see differences in, for example, in health outcomes, such as proportion of women with skilled birth attendance at any delivery. Those who meet that indicator are 80.3% versus those who do not meet are 72.7%. And so you can see about, prenatal care and babies, even outcomes for babies weigh, how much they weigh at birth. And of course, these differences are significant, are statistically significant. So what's happening, where I now come in to comment on the suggested wording, is that if you see in this table, in this slide, the original wording of this indicator, as I've been relaying to you, 561, the expert groups have suggested to add, for example, that is, women make their own decision, but they want to add not only informed, but empowered, that they are empowered. And then, of course, not only on the three components, regarding sexual relations, contraceptive use, and reproductive health care, but they want to add, and the timing and number of births. So one of the things that I have a quick comment is that let's just realize that when you have women who make their own informed decision, that implies empowerment already. So do we need to add another question? Do we need to add empowerment? And in fact, if you go to the UNFPA website page, you will see that it means that women are empowered when they make such decisions. And the other thing is, of course, if you see women making these decisions, especially on contraceptive use, but also on others, even on when to have sexual relations, you can see that it also implies that they are already thinking about the timing and the number of births. Why else, they would use contraception or maybe say no to to sex when they, those, especially those who are using the periodic abstinence rhythm method, etc. So what I want to say here is that if we really, if the decision is to add the wording, so if that means obviously adding then 2 new questions, then we would have to add, and you see in the column of the left, in the left, that you would have to add, so, and of course it depends on if the women have had, if the woman has had already births or not. So you have to ask, either do you make decisions, or you have to ask, did you make decisions? So the enumerator has to look at, what's the fertility status of the woman. And so you have to ask, so do you make decisions on the timing of birth? And of course, unfortunately, timing, and let's think of other translations to other languages, might be construed or might be heard as a technical. So what do you mean, timing? And so people will have to explain the enumerator, well, when to start, when to pause having, and then when to stop, having children. And then the second question will have to be added. Well, so do you or did you make decisions on the number of births? Obviously the total number of births that you want or you wanted to have. And so the first reaction there is that this is already seen as a long for DHS questionnaire. So adding questions might be seen as too long. And of course, needing pre-testing and approval, in order to incorporate that questionnaire, those 2 questions. Now, because we've also been asked whether there's any alternatives, for assessing this decision-making on the timing and number of births, one thing I can say is, of course, we all know that there is a question in DHS that asks about the wanted total fertility rate. If you could go back in time to the time when you had your first children, or currently if you could choose exactly the number of children to have in your whole life, how many would that be? And of course, that is used to build what is called the wanted, it was called the desired or wanted total fertility rate. And of course, this is not, current like the decision making, but it's hypothetical, so if you were able to choose, how many would that be? So that would be for that aspect of the number of children. And people can compare, and it's been compared in many studies, actual fertility rate versus wanted fertility. Okay, so the last slide is just to say what's my conclusion. And what I'm saying here is that my take is that this, as it is now, the current construct 1.1, which is actually this SDG indicator 561, already includes or implies those that the suggested elements of empowerment and timing and number of birth are already in those responses that women make. And so I feel that changing, to expressly add, those words might not be necessary. One could do, and one could add those that wording as an interpretation of that indicator, but not necessarily add it. If, however, it is seen as that those additions are needed, then the indicator will have to be changed. The measurement will have to, to change. And like I said, adding those questions to the survey. And of course, number one, what I'm saying is that the implications are that they will add complexity. So there's a 4th item that will have to be added or weighted. Well, a 4th, or at least for the number of births, the number of time spacing. Then obviously that costs, obviously that affects the burden of collection of data. But most importantly, and then the comparability, because of course being a new measure, then of course we would have to start anew and not being able to compare with the past, with past trends. The most important, I think, is that the current DHS, which is phase 8, has just been approved in April 2020. So to add questions to the DHS questionnaire might, I think, meet with some resistance, because of course, can it be done now or in 4 years when they will be ready to do the next phase of the questionnaire? And maybe, especially, there might be some resistance because they might feel it's low return for little additional information. One can say, well, what else are we adding there by those additions? So anyways, that's my take. But of course, we know this is just a presentation and we open it for discussion. And so that's the idea, that we try and arrive at a consensus. Okay, thanks very much for your attention in this special circumstances, this special times. So stay safe and healthy. Thanks very much.